Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. My name is GeekMan, and today I'll be teaching you how to create a shiny metal text effect on top of a metal mesh background. Now, a couple of assumptions that I'm making before we begin. The first one is that you are using Photoshop CC 2015 or later. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, some of the effects may not work as planned. Secondly, I am using a Windows machine. If you are using a Mac, then when I say use the Control key, that means your Command key on the keyboard. And if I say hit the Alt key, that means hit your Option key on the keyboard. And without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a new document. So hit Control N for new, and we're going to name this Shiny Metal Text. We're going to make this 3840 pixels wide, 2160 high, 150 pixels per inch. Color mode is RGB. Background contents will be white, but it doesn't matter. We'll be changing that. Color profile I'm using is going to be the working RGB, so change that to Adobe RGB 1998, and I'm using square pixels. So let's go OK, and here is our document. So let's create a new layer. Now you can do that by clicking on the Create New Layer icon at the bottom of the Layers palette, or you can hit Control, Alt, Shift, and the N key on your keyboard, and that will bring up the new layer. Then you want to change the name of the layer to Gradient. Next, we are going to select the Gradient tool by hitting G on our keyboard to bring up the Gradient tool. We're going to want a linear gradient, normal, opacity 100, reverse is unchecked, dither and transparency are both checked. And we're going to click on the gradient itself because we're going to be changing that. We're going to change the colors. The first color that we're going to change it to is going to be, let's just change the color here to D9, 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 D9. So D9, D9, D9. Okay, that's a very, very light gray. Then we are going to change the other side also to the same thing, D9, D9, D9. And in the middle, at exactly 50%, we're going to create another marker by clicking on the 50% mark, and then we're going to change that color to a deep gray, which is going to be 232323. Hit OK. Hit OK, and then with the gradient tool, we're going to start in the lower left-hand corner, click and drag up to the upper right-hand corner, let go, and we will have our gradient. Next up, because I like to keep my layers palette neat and tidy, I'm going to delete the background layer because we're not going to see it or need it anymore. So just drag that down to the trash bucket and it is gone. Now that you've selected your gradient layer, which is the only layer left, we're going to create another new layer, which is Control, Alt, and Shift, and the N key on your keyboard. And we're going to rename this layer as Mesh. Now for the mesh layer, we're going to fill this with a metal mesh pattern that I have shown you how to create in a previous video. I'll link to that video below. There will also be a link here on the screen, lower right-hand side, in case you have not seen it. But assuming that you have, we're going to go now to Edit, Fill, Pattern, and we're going to choose our pattern, which is our mesh pattern. We're going to leave Preserve Transparency unchecked, opacity is at 100%, mode is normal, script nothing, hit OK, and we now are filled with this pattern. Now that we have our background mesh, we want to give it a little bit more of an ambiance, a little deeper, darker edge to it. So what we're going to do is create another new layer above this, Control, Alt, Shift, and the N key, and we're going to name this layer Deeper Blacks. And then we're going to make sure that our foreground and background colors are black and white by hitting D on our keyboard. That will change it to foreground of black, background of white. And we're going to fill this new layer of deeper blacks with black by hitting Alt and the backspace key. We're going to change the fill opacity of this layer to 0. And then we're going to give it a layer style. So let's go and give it a layer style. Click on it. Layer style, we're going to start with an inner shadow. The blend mode will be multiply. The color will stay as black. Opacity is going to be 35%. Angle 90. Use global light is unchecked. We're going to do distance of 0. Choke will be at 15%. And size will be 50. Let's go with 50. Contour is going to be linear, anti-aliased is going to be unchecked, and noise will be 0. Then we're going to go to inner glow, and the blend mode will be hard light. The opacity is going to be 35%. Noise will be 0. Color is going to be black, so we're going to make that 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Technique is going to be softer. Source will be edge. Choke will be 0. Size is going to be all the way up at 250 pixels. The contour will be half round. Half round is this guy right here. So we're going to click on that. Anti-aliased will be check. Range is 50. Jitter is 0. And then we're going to give it a color overlay. Blend mode will be color burn. The color will be black, again, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And the opacity is only going to be 10%. And we'll hit OK. And that is our layer style for deeper blacks. Now we're going to create another layer on top. Control, Alt, Shift, and N on your keyboard. And we're going to rename this layer as Shadow Curve. Now what we're going to need here is to zoom all the way out. Now you can click on your zoom tool, hold down the Shift button, and then zoom out. Or you can just hold from any of the tools, you can hold down the Shift button, Alt button, sorry, and zoom in and out using your mouse wheel to zoom in and out if you have a mouse wheel. So we want to zoom out pretty far. About here is good. And then we're going to use our elliptical marquee tool. We're going to be using these settings. New selection, we're going to feather it for 0. Anti-alias is checked. Style is normal. And you're going to draw a very large oval, somewhere around like this. And then we're going to move that oval until it looks kind of neat to us, somewhere around here. The objective here is to fill this with black and get a line going through our metal mesh background. So now we're going to fill this oval with black by hitting Alt Backspace. And then we're going to deselect by hitting Control D. And then we're going to change the layer opacity to just 10%. Now we're going to do a similar thing, but now we're going to do it with white to make highlights in the background. So we're going to create another new layer, Control, Alt, Shift, and N on the keyboard to create a new layer. And we're going to name this Highlight 1. And then we are going to draw another big oval. And we're going to move that somewhere around like so. And then we're going to fill that with white using Control Backspace to fill with white. Deselect by hitting Control D. Then we're going to change this layer mode to overlay. And we are going to change its opacity to only 20%. Then we're going to create another highlight. So Control, Alt, Shift, N. We're going to name this Highlight 2. And we're going to draw another oval, but this one's going to be over the top left-hand corner. Oops. Like so. We can move it down a little bit, I think, right about there. Fill it with white and do the same thing that we did before. Deselect, change this to overlay, and change the opacity down to 20%. Now we can zoom back in by holding down Control Alt and using our zoom wheel on our mouse to zoom in and out until we can see it very nicely. And as you can see, we've got this black shape, white up here, kind of lighter and lighter up there to give it a nice background look. We're going to take all of our background elements. We're going to select them all by hitting the top one, then holding down Shift and clicking on the bottom one, and then dragging that whole thing down to the group icon, which is the little folder. And we're going to rename this as background elements. Now it's time to get to the actual text, the shiny metal text effect that we're looking for. So we're going to create a new layer above our background elements by hitting Control Alt Shift and N on our keyboard. And we're going to leave that. We're not going to need to rename it. And we're going to select our text tool by hitting T on our keyboard. And I am using Follies Let Plain font, which I will leave a link to in the description below. But you can use any font that you like. Now I'm using it at 300 points size, sharp, centered, and I'm going to change its color from white or black to the color that I'm using now, which is 989898, which is a medium gray color. Then you're going to click on your document and you're going to write your text. In this case, I will use my name, GeekMan. We're going to hit Accept, and we're then going to switch to our Move tool with the V key on our keyboard. And we're going to drag it to the center of our document like so. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fix any spacing issues that we have with our font. As you can see on the left-hand side, the G, E, and the K are all very spread far apart, whereas the M, A, and N are fairly close together. So what we want to do is we want to fix that leading problem, which is the space between the letters. So we're going to go back to our text tool by hitting T on our keyboard, putting our cursor in between letters and clicking, and then we're going to use the Alt key, hold that down, and we're going to use the arrow, left and right arrow keys to move the text closer and further apart as needed. Now I like it to be fairly close, so that's the way that I'm going to make this look. We're going to hit the check mark when we are done, and our text is now ready for the layer effect, which will make it look like shiny metal. So let's get those effects started. We're going to go down to our layer effects at the bottom of our layers palette, and we're going to start with a bevel and emboss. Now I'll move this out of the way so that you can see the effects taking effect as I make them. Now the bevel and emboss, we're going to use a stroke emboss. Technique will be smooth. The depth will be 300%. Direction will be up. The size is going to be 27. The soften will be 0%. Angle will be 85 degrees over 26 degrees. And as usual, uncheck use global light. We're also going to use the gloss counter of double ring, which is actually called ring double, which can be found right here. Anti-aliased is going to be unchecked, and highlight mode will be linear dodge, add, and it's going to be pure white, which is FFFFFF, and it's going to be at 77%. Our shadow mode will be linear burn, it's going to be pure black, which is 0,00000, and opacity is going to be 64%. Next up, we're going to give this bevel and emboss a contour. So we're going to click on contour, and in the elements, we're going to make the contour a ring, standard ring, which is right next to the double ring that we just used. Anti-aliased will be checked, and range is going to be 50%. Next up is a stroke. So click on stroke, and we're going to make that size of 20 pixels. It's going to be centered. It's going to have a blend mode of linear dodge add. Opacity will be 100%. Overprint will be unchecked. The fill type will be a gradient, so you want to change from color to gradient. And the gradient that we're going to use is called silver. Now, if you don't see silver, which is this guy right here, in your gradients list, then you need to go to the little sprocket here, click on that, and you want to add the metals gradient to your gradient list. Once you have it there, you then click on that and you've got your silver gradient. You want to make sure that reverse is unchecked, align with layer is checked, the style is linear. We're going to do the angle of 92, dither is unchecked, and the scale is going to be 124%. Moving down the line, we are going to go with a satin look. So we're going to put the blend mode at multiply, and the color is going to be pure black, 0,0,0,0,0,0. Opacity will be 25%. Angle is going to be 90%. Distance will be 50. Size will be 18. The contour is going to be this guy right here. I forgot the name of it. It is cone, and then we're going to make it anti-aliased and inverted will both be checked. Next up is a color overlay. So we're going to click on that. We're going to make it a color burn. The color is going to be this color of D0E8EF, and the opacity will be 100%. Getting close to the end, but not quite there yet. Next up is a gradient overlay, and we're going to use a blend mode of screen. Dither will be checked. Opacity is going to be 75%, and we are once again going to use the silver gradient for our gradient overlay. We're going to leave reverse and align with layer unchecked. We're going to do the style is going to be an angle. We're going to make the angle 135 degrees, and the scale will be 88%. Just two more left. First up is the pattern overlay. So the blend mode that we're going to use is overlay, and we're going to make the opacity 64%. And the pattern that we're using is going to be streaks. Now, if you don't see streaks, once again, you're going to need to go to your sprocket, and you're going to need to load patterns to and append that, or just replace your patterns with that. And in there you will find this streaky looking thing, and it is, oddly enough, called streaks. You want to click on that, and then we're going to make the scale 574%, and we're going to link that with layer, make sure that that's checked. Then we're going to go on to the drop shadow, and that will be our last. So we're going to make the blend mode multiply. Opacity will be 76. The color is going to be pure black, 0,0,0,0,0. 0,0,0,0,0,0. It's all zeros. Angle is going to be 135 degrees. Use global light, as always, is unchecked. We're going to make the distance 32. The spread is 0. And the size is 35. The quality, we're going to use contour of linear. Anti-aliased is unchecked, and noise is going to be 0. Make sure that you have layer knocks out drop shadow checked. You're going to need that. Then we're going to hit OK, and that is our shiny metal text. Now, if you want, you could stop here. You've got metal text on a background, but I like to add a little bit more flair to this to make it look shinier and more metallic. So what we're going to do now is we're going to collapse the layer effects by clicking on the little arrow here, and then we are going to create another new layer. So Control-Alt-Shift-N, and we're going to name this layer Flare. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fill this layer with black. So we need to get our foreground and background colors back to their default by hitting D on our keyboard. And then we're going to fill this with black by hitting Alt and backspace. So that should cover everything up. Then we're going to change the layer mode to screen. And we're going to change the layer opacity to only 50%. You might be asking why we did that when you don't see any difference, but that's because we're going to add in a lens flare. So make sure you have your flare layer selected, and we're going to go up here to Filter, Render, Lens Flare. We're going to choose the 50 to 300 millimeter zoom. We're going to leave the brightness at 100%, and as you can see, we have a flare. Now the flare is not exactly where we want it, and unfortunately the preview window doesn't actually show you your document. It just shows you a black screen. So what you need to do is grab this little tiny crosshair and move that to approximately where you want that shine to be. Now I want it to be somewhere close to where the G is in GeekMan, so I'm going to move it to about here. That's close enough for government work. We're going to hit OK, and you're going to see that it's roughly where I want it, but not quite exactly where I need it to be. So here's a trick on how to change this. Oops, let's see. Here's a trick on how to transform this and scale it to where you want it to be without messing up anything else. So what you want to do is you want to hit Control-T to bring up your transform tool. And then you want to move your shine to exactly where you want that shine to be. And I want it right there above the G, right on that G. So that's where I want it. Now, in the transform box, and it's hard to see, unless you zoom in a little bit, I guess. Nope, it's not showing it to me. Well, let's just hit Enter, and then we'll hit Control-T again, and we should see the center of this somewhere. Where is it? There it is. It's right there. So we want to move this over the G, and then we want to find that center that was just somewhere around here. Where is it? Where did it go? There it is. It's right here. You can see it barely. It's very hard to see. Okay, so keep an eye on it. Okay, I know where it is. It's right here. So we're going to grab that center. See, now nothing moves except that center, and we're going to put it in the center of that burst. And that way, when we scale our image, it scales around that center. See how that scales? So now I can make it as big or as small as I want, and it won't move away from the placement that I put it. So there we go. We've got our G, now looks good. We've got our shine, shine everywhere. All looks good to me. So we're going to hit Enter to accept that. And now we've got a flare going across our lettering. But wait, there's more. So the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to put some bling onto this shiny metal text. So we're going to create another new layer above the flare, Control-Alt-Shift and N, and we're going to rename this as bling. Simple. And then we're going to change our foreground and background, make sure that they are our default. So hit D. Then we're going to switch the black and the white by hitting X on our keyboard. White is now our foreground color. We're going to go to our brushes, and we're going to use a star brush. Now, if you don't have any star brushes, you can find them for free on the web to download, or you can follow my tutorial on how to create your own star brushes, which I will have a link below, and there should be one here on your screen on the lower right-hand corner. So once you have your brushes with all of your stars, as you can see, I've made quite a few, you can select those stars and then start adding bling to your lettering, like so. And I won't bore you by doing this in real time. I'll speed this up so that you'll see the end. And in a few seconds, you'll see how it should look towards the end. And there you have it. Shiny metal text on a metal mesh background. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please leave a comment, give me a thumbs up, or subscribe. There'll be new tutorials every week. This is GeekMan signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.